you do get, the more rules are gonna try to get you to follow. You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Wildlife episode. Today we are joined with someone who is a great buddy of mine. He happens to be one of the youngest people in the world to complete, or not one of the youngest person in the world, to complete one of the craziest feats in hunting, one of 43 people. He is the youngest to complete the North American Super Slam. So we're super excited to talk about that today. Today we're joined with Lincoln Tapp. What's up, Lincoln?
Yo.
How's it going?
Happy to be here, man.
Heck yeah. So first things first, for people who maybe don't know what the North American Super Slim is, kind of explain what that is and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah, so the Super Slam, or North American 29 as some people call it, is the taking of all 29 North American big game animals. And so big game just refers to like deer, elk, caribou, moose, sheep, and there's 10 categories of big game, and in total they make up 29 animals. And so I did it all with a bow. I finished it last year at the age of 20, and now I'm blessed to say that I'm the youngest one ever to do it. So
Heck yeah. How long did something like that take you to complete?
Took me just over 10 years. So,
Dang.
Yeah.
When did you start bow hunting, and what made you want to start and have that passion?
So I started hunting when I have memories walking to a deer stand with my dad, just like Jack does at like 3 or 4 years old. But I started bow hunting, I would say, I started hunting like for myself when I was probably 7 or 8, and then I started bow hunting when I was 9. And then the first year I started bow hunting, the second year I was bow hunting, I started traveling and actually chasing the Super Slam.
So you started like pretty young.
Yeah.
Did that have like an impact on you, like negatively or positively, like growing up? Like, I'm sure your lifestyle was different than other kids.
Yeah. It was a lot different. When I first started, I was still going to the private school that Jack graduated from. So nothing was really different from that perspective. But I'd say when my path really started to differentiate was when I started homeschooling, and that was for a host of other reasons. Our family just personally decided to homeschool, and it wasn't because of my hunting. But then when we decided to homeschool, I would say that it opened up a lot of opportunities for me to be able to be gone a lot more, and allowed me to chase that goal wholeheartedly. And so, I don't know if the hunting part of it, kind of the homeschooling is like the biggest life change that happened first, and then like the homeschooling like opened the door to be able to do a lot of that stuff. And then obviously, being gone from home 2 months or 3 months out of the year cumulatively, on hunting trips, hunting trip after hunting trip, definitely, it shaped my life a lot and shaped what my fall and spring schedule looked like. And I sacrificed a lot to be able to do that, but obviously I would do it all again. It was well worth it, and it made me who I am today. So
Right.
Yeah.
So what was that like travel life like?
Yeah. A lot of travel. So some of the hunts that we went on, far northern Canada, Mexico, New Zealand. That actually wasn't a part of the Super Slam, but I did that while I was chasing the Super Slam. But, man, these are like really remote places to get to. So it's not just like, you're flying into big commercial airports and it's easy connections. It's, you're flying to, you're flying to Whitehorse, Yukon, which is like the biggest town in the Yukon Territory of Canada. And then from there, you're taking a float plane, an hour flight out there, and then you're taking horseback 8 hours out into the bush. And, it's a lot of travel. The travel is the biggest part of it. It's like, you travel as much as you hunt, it feels like.
Yeah.
And so it's just something you have to get used to. It's a pain. So much, troubles getting luggage on, and then every airport you go to, I've figured out, has a different rule on whether or not a bow and arrow is a weapon, which, I would say me and Jack could probably argue that it could be a weapon, but, man,
In the hands of who?
Yeah, in the hands of Jack.
So it depends on the airport.
It literally depends on the airport. Like I would say it's 50-50. And so if it's a
Dang,
weapon,
wow.
you got to go back there and you got to unpack your bow. You got to like
That's
Shit.
kind of strange because you would feel like it would be like just one
like a
federal
TSA,
law,
like a TSA
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
I've never really
And-
had issues with that though.
Dude,
which
I
is
swear it's
crazy.
like I think it may be a Canada thing or something, but it's like 50-50 everywhere I've gone. I would say it's split right down the middle of whether or not a bow is a weapon, and you declare it differently. But yeah, travel is a pain, but it's just one of those things you get used to, and it's kind of the consequence of being able to do that stuff. So.
What about like transporting like the animal after you shoot it? Because I'm sure a lot of times you are flying.
Yeah.
How would you get it back?
So in certain special cases, you can, if you can get a dry ice cooler together, and you can kind of what we did in Alaska,
Yeah.
you can try to bring back as much of it, and just pay the fee for however much that weighs on the plane.
Okay.
To put it under the plane, but the main way you get it back is you have to have it shipped to you, which is like if you can get it back with you on the plane with your person, that makes it way cheaper, but it's also a pain just to figure it out. And a lot of times,
Right.
we book our flights like as soon as I get the animal, we booked our flights and we were out of there, ready
Yeah.
to get home because my dad. We had to do this all within my dad's work schedule too. He was always with me on every one of my hunts, and so if you can get it back with you, that's awesome. But the main way you get it back to you is with a trophy shipping service, and they put everything in a crate with dry ice, and they'll ship it to you and have it overnighted or whatever. So,
That's nice.
yeah.
Huh.
But
I kind of want to talk about so I've kind of had like a front row seat to this whole thing, just kind of as you've been growing up and as you've been chasing this. And something super cool that not a ton of people know is that you used to have a TV show. And so, what was that like, just kind of growing up, being on camera a lot, and any, impact that had on you? Or did you enjoy that experience? Because, now it's off the air, so you've had moments where you've been chasing this goal on camera, and then it's still been on camera, but it hasn't been for kind of the world to see. How does that go into the whole pursuit of it?
I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's I would say when I first started hunting, everything we've done on camera. My dad, he would film every one of my hunts ever since I was little. I don't know why. I think he just wanted it for family memories at first, and that's how it started. And then we pitched the show to the Outdoor Channel, got the show on the Outdoor Channel, and that's how Young Wild started. And Young Wild ran for 5 seasons, and it was a people told us we couldn't do it. People told us the youth hunting show wouldn't work, and it ended up working out really well, and it was a huge blessing. But I said that to say at first it just started as a home video, family deal.
Yeah.
And because that's kind of where the roots of it was, there was no pressure at first that related to the camera. That being said, when I started to get recognition for the stuff that I was doing, when it became an official TV show, when we made the teaser for the Yukon Stone, which was I harvested a stone sheep at 12 years of age, and I was the youngest person to ever do that with a bow. And it was, same kind of deal. The outfitter that I was with told me it's probably not going to happen, but we'll give it our all and we'll try it. And then I ended up harvesting a stone sheep, and it kind of shocked the sheep hunting world at the time that I did it. Because it's a very hard animal to hunt with a bow, and I did it at 12. And so when that happened, it was a lot of pressure because it's now people are looking at you to deliver in that same way in the future going forward. It was a lot of pressure.
And you were 12 years old
And I
when
was
you did
12 years
this?
old, yeah.
Wow. And most people, adults, struggle with that.
Yeah, I would say the average is at least twice for a stone sheep. You go on at least 2 trips of 14 days each, and sometimes 3. And I killed it on day 5 of trip 1.
Wow.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Wow.
So huge.
Did you
blessing,
even
of course.
realize what you just did as a
Yeah.
12-year-old?
Just because I researched it so much. A lot of people, I think to this day, a lot of people question whether or not I knew the scope of what I was doing at the time, which I don't think I still realized how lucky I was to be able to do it. I think as I get older, I'm learning to appreciate it. But as far as just how difficult it was, I knew that because I read books, I watched videos of all my hunting mentors, everybody I looked up to.
Yeah, this was your life.
yeah.
Even you were so just
immersed in.
Yeah, immersed with the whole Super Slam, the goal. Like, it was just everything you did revolved around that, for sure.
From a very young age. And so I knew what I did was a big deal, and then when it started to get recognition in the hunting world, it was just a lot of pressure because people are thinking you're going to go on to do the same thing again. And I'm blessed to say I did. I finished my archery Grand Slam at 15 years old, which is the youngest ever.
Which is what? What's the Grand Slam, and then there's a Super Slam. What's the Grand Slam?
So the Grand Slam is the taking of all the sheep, and so it's for North American wild sheep. It's also called FNOS by the Wild Sheep Foundation. That's what that acronym is. But it's Dall sheep, stone sheep, bighorn sheep, and desert sheep. And I finished that at the age of 15, youngest ever to do it with archery equipment. And yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of pressure, and the camera started to get to me at that age, I would say. And then when the show went off air and we stopped filming for that reason again, I feel like I kind of hit a groove again where it was like, just go out there and perform. The pressure went away, and I didn't perform badly when our show was on air, but it was always just that thing in the back of my mind of, the
what
style.
if I missed this shot? Or
Yeah. And the style of show we had, we were honest about everything.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say not every outdoor show is like that. Like, there's a lot of guys, being in the outdoor industry long enough, you figure out there's a lot of guys who cut stuff out that they're ashamed about or whatever. But we would show everything. And so I'm sitting there thinking, man, if I do this, my producer's going to put it in the show. Like, it's just going to happen. But, yeah, I would say after the show went off air, I hit, like, a groove again where I was just like, I'm just out here doing this, and this is for me again, and it's, I'm having fun. And when I'm having fun is when I perform best. I think Jack could attest to that too with archery in general. You're performing best when you're having fun.
For sure.
That's sick. What would you say, like, your top 3 favorite hunts are? Like, is it, like, the more rare animals or the ones that you had to work the hardest, or maybe both?
Man, I would say my favorite ones are kind of they're a lot different, each one of them, but they're all, like, special for their own reason. I would say my number one favorite hunt ever was my stone sheep hunt, the one I talked about when I killed it at 12 years old. I mean, it was just the way it happened, and to this day, it's the biggest blessing, I've ever had dropped in my lap.
Was that the one you, like, popped over the hill and it was just right there?
Yeah.
That video is sick.
And that's the thing, like, I'm not saying I wasn't good for my age back then, because that's literally all I spent my time doing was shooting my bow in the backyard. I was a pretty good shot, but my max yardage at 12 years old, I think, was like 40 yards. Like, that was my max. And,
So you're pretty close.
Yeah, not only was it hard to hunt a stone sheep with a bow, it's very hard to hunt a stone sheep with a bow when your max range is 40 yards. I mean, most of the guys that I know who have shot one, it's like a 50, 60, 70-yard shot. So outside of what would have been my effective range at that time, and this particular ram that I shot him at 5 yards. And to this day,
How did you even get that close?
That video's
That's
on
crazy.
YouTube, right?
by accident. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Y'all should go look that up, because it's a crazy video. Yeah.
Bro just pops his head over the rock, and there's one chilling right there.
If I remember, I'll put it in, like, the description or something for people to watch, because it's a crazy video.
Yeah, it was just one of the, like, we didn't even mean to get that close. It was just like the Lord just said, "Here you go. Here's a little nugget." And it was just there.
Yeah.
And I was 5 yards, and I popped up, and it still took skill to pull that off, for sure. I mean, I popped up at the right time, drew at the right time, and shot at the right time. But all that said, it was a huge blessing. I don't really know where I was going with that. What was the
Second favorite.
Yeah. Your top 3 favorite
Yeah,
hunts.
so that was my favorite, I would say.
Actually, go ahead. I have a question here in a second.
Okay. Are you gonna forget?
Well, I didn't know if, like, the polar bear was in the top 3 or not, but I'd assume, like, you're pretty close when you shot that too, right? Because this was all done with a bow.
I was actually far. I was not crazy far. I mean, I was 50 yards on that one, and then the finishing shot.
That story is just insane.
Yeah.
But we can
Are you
talk
not
about that
afraid,
later
like,
in
it's
the-
gonna charge you or something?
I was.
Well,
for sure.
Because,
There's
like,
a good story.
bears
I
are,
wasn't
like,
afraid
notorious
enough.
for
I wasn't
charging.
afraid- long story short, I wasn't afraid enough.
Yeah, there's a great story behind that, but we can get there in a second.
That's
Okay.
untold, actually.
Okay,
Really?
we'll get there.
Yeah.
Oh,
This could be
exclusive
the-
maybe?
This could be the launch.
Let's get it.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that stone sheep, my biggest whitetail ever. I shot it so the property I grew up on actually it was a deer farm. We grew up on 300 acres that my dad had high fenced just to watch deer. And I say deer farm, I mean, we didn't touch these deer; they were wild. But we high fenced it because my dad liked to watch deer and he liked to see the same deer come back every year. And so I grew up on a high fence place, but we never hunted it once growing up. Like I never hunted it. Jack remembers we had this one deer named Charlie that we raised from a fawn. And we bottle fed him as a baby. He lost his mom. We don't know how. I think she got killed. But we bottle fed him from a baby, like a little fawn. And he grew up to be like crazy tame and will like come up and eat food.
He was a big deer too.
Yeah, big buck.
And you just walk right up to you, could pet him.
Yeah, I have all of his sheds. Like we have some cool pictures with him.
Super cool.
But he was the only deer on that property that was like that. Like just because we raised him. But long story short, the tornadoes in 2014 came through Oklahoma like with vengeance, and one of them hit the childhood home I grew up in, which was within that high fence place, and also blew over the entire like huge sections of the high fence. And so high fence got knocked down, and then we just snipped it and took it down. And so I lived in this like other house for 2 years while our house was getting rebuilt. We moved back into our childhood home, which was really cool. And then like 2 years later, I actually started putting cameras up, and I was like, the fence has been down so long, there's none of the same deer left, and there really wasn't. Like we legitimately didn't know any of the deer in the place, and it was completely low fence at that point. And so we started putting cameras up, and on a neighboring property, I got this giant buck on camera, and I became obsessed with him. I just put cameras up literally everywhere. He'd never been on the home place before, like. Until the day that I shot him, and then like I said, I found him on a neighboring place. And then the day I shot him, I was at school that morning at my little like once a week school we did for homeschool. It's called like a co-op. Yeah. But we won't talk about that too much. But I got him on camera for the first time ever on my home place, like literally on a camera I had that was 200 yards from the house I grew up in. And so got him on camera. I said, I know he's bedded in there with a doe. There's been a bunch of other bucks throughout there that morning, and went in there that evening and killed him like 200 yards from the house I grew up in, and have so many amazing memories. He died in a field, and in the background of the picture, the first picture of me holding him, you can see this feeder that's been there like ever since I was a kid. And there's like videos of me like sneaking up on deer, and like shooting at them with my little kiddie bow like back in the day. And so just that one was unbelievably special, and a deer that is bigger than anything my dad or I have ever seen on that place in 25 years. And so just a fluke of a deal, the way it happened, how close it was to home. That was just a cool memory. And it's a whitetail, it's not as like prestigious of an animal as like a stone sheep, but because of how special it was to me and how special the animal was, and seeing the look on my dad's face, the way it all came together, that's a crazy memory for me. And then I think the polar bear has to be thrown in there. That was crazy. I mean, just the fact that, we can get into that, but it's just the fact that it took so much work to get it done right on the day that it happened.
Are a lot of these experiences like pretty emotional, like after you shoot them, putting in all that work?
A lot of those hunts are week-long hunts of just like tracking this animal, right?
Yeah.
Straight grind.
Yeah. Especially with a bow. I mean, it's that's why we do it. It's so fun to put in that much work and then see it come to fruition. I've never, and I'm not saying this to crap on rifle hunting at all, because you're still out there, you're still seeing the same scenery, you still do all the same travel, but I've never been on a hunt where I couldn't have gotten it done with a rifle, like not one. And so what's cool to me is, the added pressure of, with a bow, there's no guarantees you're going to walk out that hunt without an animal. So, the challenge is what makes it fun. But it's a grind the whole time.
That's sick.
Sometimes we want to rip our hair out. Sometimes I wish I was rifling. But
All right, so tell the polar bear story.
you want to hear it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Get more into that.
And the polar bear, it's kind of it's a little bit of a controversial animal.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah, it is. I didn't do your classic like grip and grin photo on my Instagram with the polar bear, because I realize it's sensitive, and there's a lot of just because of the misinformation that's out there. Me, in my heart, I don't have any problem that I've killed a polar bear. I know the facts behind it. I've literally talked to the biologists up there who do the research studies and who monitor the populations, and what they'll tell you is that polar bear populations actually are higher than they've been since we've been recording them right now. And that's taking everything into account. That's across the whole Arctic. That's not, picking one population and saying, oh, they're on the decline, which there are some populations in Alaska that are on the decline right now and they don't know why. But as a whole, polar bear populations are good. But, they've never been a super plentiful animal. They live on the ice, in the most harsh conditions that exist on this earth. And so, there's just not much food. There's not much for them to live off of. So they're just not a super plentiful animal when you compare them to like a deer or something like that. So that's where the misinformation gets mixed up. And they're also a very, very breathtaking animal to look at. And so that's why they've become so popular as kind of and they're intertwined with the whole global warming agenda. And so when you have that much at play, there gets to be a lot of stuff out there that makes people passionate. But that's my little spiel about it. But
tell us a little bit more like about the experience. Like, you said you were 50 feet out, right?
The days prior, like what the hunt was like.
Yeah. So.
Because you're in the middle of nowhere, right?
Middle of nowhere. I mean, yes and no. So, on where I hunted polar bears at, the traditional way you hunt polar bears is actually on dog sled, and
That's sick.
That is really cool.
Sick. And
I would want to do that for fun.
Yeah. I mean, and I want to go back and do it for this reason. I mean, it's so cool the way that they traditionally do it. I've been on the waiting list to hunt polar bears for 4 or 5 years by the time I got it done. And Jack remembers when I got the call. And
Yeah, we were in Alaska when you got the call.
Yeah, I was like a month out from the hunt.
Yeah.
But I've been on a waiting list for like 4 or 5 years to get on this hunt. And not that I never had the opportunity to do it, but it never felt right. It never fell into our schedules. And so.
Because COVID was going on, right, when you were
Yeah.
trying to get this done, with it being your last animal.
Yeah, so, I mean, to begin with, it's a hard hunt to get booked, but then COVID hits.
Was everything more restricted because of COVID?
Everything was more restricted.
We're just trying to get into Canada.
I had to get my vaccine just to kill the bull bear. I had to get my vaccine. And that was literally just to be able to go. And so, COVID hit, made it that much harder to get on the hunt. And long story short, like the way that you traditionally hunt them is in the spring, which is the coldest time of year up there. You go out on the ice and you dog sled for days and days and days on end, and you're just dog sledding across the ice with the Inuits, which is like the Canadian version of an Eskimo. It's the same thing, but it's the Canadian version. And they just live off the land. They've been doing this for thousands of years, and they still live the same way that they did. I mean, it's of course they have like towns now and they have generators and stuff, but they're still living off the land. I mean, they're still eating.
That's cool.
Fermented whale blubber that they have in their fridge. I mean, it's like they eat stuff you would never.
What's the craziest thing you ate when you were there?
I didn't dive way off into it really. I ate blubber. It's not bad. Like it's
Really?
just like kind of. Yeah.
Does it taste like just
smoke
fat or what?
Yeah, it's just like kind of fatty and but they let it like ferment and like, yeah, it's interesting.
Yummy.
Yeah, I don't think I miss it that much.
Bring some animal crackers too. So
Yeah.
get you by.
Yeah, I bring a huge tub. It's hard to fit sometimes, but I
Yeah,
get it in
yeah.
there. But yeah, so the traditional way you hunt them, you're literally on dog sled for days and days, just looking and looking and looking, and you'll be like 200 miles out on the ice from the nearest town. And when I say town, I'm talking about like a little village, like it's like a dwelling. It's not anything special. And to get to those towns, you either have to fly or barge in. There's no roads out. And so that's the traditional way you hunt them, and it's snow everywhere, snow covered. But I got the call when I was on a hunt with Jack. We were hunting the Alaskan Haul Road, and we were hunting up by Dead Horse. And literally on a sat phone, I got a call from my good buddy Tony Mudd, who does a lot of work for Shane Black of Canada North Outfitters. And he was like, hey, we had a fall polar bear hunt come available. And he's like, it's not what we traditionally do with bow hunters, but it's kind of it's kind of experiential or experimental what we're going to do. And, you're going to be kind of one of the first guys to do it with a bow in the fall. Like, there's not going to be any snow on the ground. You're going to be literally eye to eye with polar bears, stalking them, just the old-fashioned way. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. And so
I bet you were hyped when you got that phone call.
I was so hyped. And then also just like this wave of stress came on.
Yeah.
And Jack
I remember your dad more than anything was like, well, your mom can either get a new car or we can go pull her wedding.
Yeah. He's like, dude, you better order arrows right now. He's
Yeah.
like, as soon as we get back in service, order arrows.
Yeah.
It's like, I swear if we
Watching
if
your
we're dealing with
dad
that
get all
again.
stressed out about the hunts is like the best part. Dude.
But,
Shout out Jimmy.
But do you have arrows and broadheads? Seriously.
No, like seriously.
But yeah, so I mean, I've been waiting for like 4 or 5 years for this opportunity, and then I have a month to get ready for the biggest hunt of my life by far, and it's the one that finishes off my Super Slam.
For all the marbles.
For all the marbles. And then, I actually got COVID right after that. I got the shot, and then I got COVID right after I got the shot, and was bedridden for like a week of the, 3 weeks by the time we got home that I had to get ready. So that was stressful. Got all my stuff ordered for the hunt, all my big clothes, all my gear, my arrows, everything I needed. And then we took off, and it was like pretty surreal. I'm in all my, I didn't bring any like casual clothes because we're going up to northern Canada, and I'm in all my gear, and it was just like I've done it 100 times, but that trip just felt different. Leaving, I was like, this is everything I've worked up for. I've worked up to for the last 10 years. It was just like surreal.
So what was the hunt like?
So as I mentioned, this is a different hunt than the spring hunt. And we get there, and we're hunting out of a village called Coral Harbor, and it's like a pretty large fishing village for this area of Canada. It's a pretty big place. It's on an island, and it's called Southampton Island is the island in Canada that's on, and it's a legit island, but it's huge, and there's rivers all throughout this island. So there's river systems that run through the island and keep you from getting around. If the rivers are too high, you can't get around on the island with four-wheelers or any of the things that the Eskimo or the Inuits have to get around with. And so we got there, and it's like the classic thing. Like, I swear every hunting trip you go on, they like work you up for the hunt and like get you all excited, and then you get there, and like immediately when you land, they're gonna have like some kind of like Debbie Downer bad news. Like, it's like, and I don't know if they're just setting expectations, like not wanting you to get too hyped up or something, but immediately we land, and they're like, yeah, we've had a record amount of rainfall, and we're just not going to be able to get around for like 4 days. So y'all are just going to actually stay in this like tiny motel with this creepy old dude.
And eat whale blubber.
And and do nothing for like 4 days. We're like, all right, bet. Like, we're here. So we just get to this tiny motel out in the middle of nowhere. And I was kidding about creepy old dude. He was actually super nice.
Yeah, what if he watches this, dude? Come on.
Shout out. But super nice older guy that owned this motel in Coral Harbor, Nunavut. And and literally for 4 days, we went out twice. But like the way the island is, like let's say this is like the island, like the section that you could access with this river as high as it was like that big, like right there. Dang. Like it was like a tiny part of the island. So like we can't access any of the areas that we were really wanting to get to and hunt, and the seas were too rough to get out on a boat. So we get there, and it's like I'm so worked up, like so ready to go, and for 4 days we had to sit in camp and like do nothing. And it's just like, man, this sucks. Like I was just like, I was wasting away, man. And then finally on the 4th day we get word that the oceans are gonna settle down and we can get out on the boat. So our guide comes and gets us to the motel. He's like, all right, you ready to go? And we're like, yeah. He's like, all right, meet me down at the boat dock in an hour. And so threw all of our stuff in like our backpacks, got everything packed in backpacks, and then threw my bow back in the hard case because I've been practicing a little bit in the village. And he's like, okay, we have like 2 days to work with, and then the oceans are going to get real high again, and there's a giant storm moving in. But we got 2 days to work with, and we're going to go out to this tiny cabin that I built this last summer, way down, about 20 miles from here, and we're going to stay there, and we're going to hunt out of this cabin. We're going to stay 2 nights, and then we're going to come back. So I'm like, this sounds awesome. Like we're about to get out on this like little fishing skiff out in the middle of the ocean and go out to this cabin that this Inuit guide had built, and we're just going to stay there out with the polar bears and, just be hunting. And so we did. We went out. It was about a 3-hour boat ride to get out there, and then we got in right as dark was setting that night, and it was still like usually when you're that far north in Canada, it's so jacked up. Either it's like dark all the time or light all the time. And a lot of my hunts have been in August that far north, and so it's like light all the time. But at the time of year we were there in September, it was pretty balanced out, so it was like days and nights were normal. And so we got to camp right as dark was setting, and the tide is like something big that you have to worry about. Like it's like one of those things that like flatlanders from Oklahoma we'd never even think about.
Yeah.
Like, we'd be beached all the time, but like they have this giant lead line that's attached to the anchor, so they're like, okay, you guys, like we roll up to this cabin. I say cabin, it's like a shack. Like it's literally like plywood, and it's like, you know, if you guys can't see it, but like from that brick right there, like pretty much where Spencer's at, just this room, like is how big this place is. And it's like this tiny shack that he built and actually snowmobiled, like drug it behind a snowmobile on a sled out there.
Oh my
And it was
God.
already built
And it's
on
already
the way
built.
there.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you
So
know,
it's just this
It's pretty
mini
much just a
building that he
nicer
had
tent.
behind.
it's basically if you like let us loose for a whole summer and just let us like mess around with snowmobiles. And basically that's what this thing looked like. And so it's just this big. And we threw all of our gear in there, and they're like, okay, you know, like, we have a couple backup guns with us. We're polar bear hunting. They're dangerous animals. From everything I've heard, polar bears are actually the most apt to charge and the most aggressive of all the bears, but nobody really knows it because they're so much less hunted than like brown bears and grizzly bears. So those ones are, you know, more known for it. But people say the percentages of polar bears that will charge if given the opportunity.
Did you know that going in?
Yeah, I've been told that.
That might
by
be
a lot.
why too. Just them not being as hunted.
Yeah, I mean they don't have anything to fear. They just
Yeah.
never. They don't. There's nothing they're scared of.
Did it ever cross your mind that, you know, that could be your last hunt?
I mean, yeah. I mean, so that night, so that night,
Oh man.
literally, like, we like throw all our gear in there, and he's like, all right, you guys good to go? We're like, what do you mean? Like what are you talking about? Like, you're staying here, right? He's like, oh no, we're actually gonna go stay in the boat and make sure the boat doesn't get beached tonight by the tide. But like, you guys will be good in here. Like, we'll come get you in the morning. We'll like stay watching for bears and stuff. So like, as far as they had to go out to keep the boat from beaching from the tide, I mean, they were like 350 yards away from us. Like, that's how flat it was. They just had to be like way out there. And so they're out on this boat, and I can hear the boat like clanking on the rocks, but they didn't leave us with a backup gun. Like, they only had like one gun, and our guy wanted it. And so I
On
was
the
like,
boat.
on the boat,
Yeah.
you know, and he's on the boat, and I'm in this
what's
little
that gonna
shack,
do?
and I'm in this little shack, and the security mechanism is a little board, you know, a little like piece of wood that's on a nail, and you just swivel it over. It's on the door.
That's what's
Like
protecting you
a
from
bear
the
can
bears.
just stay like this and up, doors open, full on buffet, and we're just sitting there like sitting ducks.
It's like Lincoln logs in there.
I'm telling you, dude, you just like James.
Facts, dude.
So I was like kind of freaked out that night. Like everything I heard, I'd like wake up my dad. I'd be like, Dad, do you hear that? Like we should probably should we scream really loud and like get the guys over here? But I've always been like that. Like my dad will joke with you about. He'll tell you about how like every time we've ever stayed in a tent out in bear or wolf country, I'm always like freaking out. But I kind of grew out of it. But then the polar bear hunt, it came back. But woke up that morning, we were alive. But the only issue was our guides, who the whole reason they stayed in the boat that night was to not beach the boat. Literally, we wake up and they're like 100 yards from us, and we're like, man, I just feel like the water's way farther than that. And sure enough, like the boat was beached by like hundreds of yards. Like, I kid you not. The boat was just like, they didn't do their job. They both fell asleep like after an hour, and the boat was beached. So we had to wait like hours and hours for the boat to like the tide to come back in, the boat to get in water again, because we can't drag this huge boat over to the water. So that's how our day started off. We're on day 5. Haven't even really hunted polar bears yet. And finally, tide comes in, boat starts floating, and we're off. And we leave, and I'm just like, man, I hope it happens today. Like, we need this to happen. We don't have we don't have a very long break in the weather. This hunt is just not going how I thought it was going to go. We need to find a polar bear.
So are y'all just going like around the outside of the island?
Yeah, so we can't really get very far interior. So our best bet right now is to just, drive the boat around the island and glass from the shore and see what we can find.
Why can't you go
Because
interior?
those rivers, right?
Yeah, we can't. So like
They don't
a lot of times the way they access the island is literally on quads, on 4-wheelers, And so
Oh,
on the boat, like just covering as much ground as we can on the shoreline was our best bet.
right.
And he also took us to a couple islands, like tiny islands off the shore of the big island. That he says like he was like this one island he had me all psyched for. Like he was like every time we pass this island, there's always a bunch of walrus on it, and there's always a polar bear on it. And I was like, dude, that sounds awesome. Like it's about to be like Nat Geo, and then I'm like, come on, polar bear, and it's gonna be like walruses in the background. Like, and then we passed the island. There wasn't a polar bear on the island, and we looked all day. I mean, we're out glassing, and we would motor the boat like for 5 miles. We'd just kind of be going along the shoreline, seeing if we see anything huge and white, and then we'd stop and glass for a little bit. And this goes on all day, and it's getting to be evening time, and I'm like, man, I just feel like we've like covered a lot of ground. Like we really have. We've been going along the shoreline for hours and hours and hours on end in places that he swore there's a lot of polar bears. And then all of a sudden, like I see this like white glimmering thing up ahead, and I was like, hey, stop the boat for a second. So stop the boat. We pull our binos out, and I look, and it's just this like big shiny rock. And I was like, man, like that was like there's always like a point in the hunt where you kind of, you don't like admit it, but you kind of break mentally and you're like, frick, man, this is just like not working out like I thought it was going to. And then right as I was thinking that, I'm like, whatever, dude. And I just like pull the glasses up again. And then all of a sudden my eyes just settle on this huge, like cream colored thing up on the shore. And I'm still like not getting my hopes up. I'm like, surely that's just like a giant rock again. Like there's no way. But I told my dad, I was like, look at that.
Let's go.
And he was like, man, I think that's a bear, bud. And so had our guide look at it, and our guide like pulls his binos up, and he's like, his eyes got about this big around, and he's like, that's a polar bear. And
Is this on the big island?
Yeah, this is on the main island.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, like, I see my first polar bear, and he's like this giant bear, absolutely giant bear. And you can tell from there, I was like, bears are notoriously hard to judge of any kind. And I was like, man, he looks pretty big. And my guy was like, yeah, that's a giant bear. And so my heart just starts pounding out of my chest. I'm like so excited. And we're just sitting there watching him. He's bedded up on this hill up above the boat, about probably 400 or 500 yards away at this point. And
Bro, my heart's pounding listening to you tell this.
yeah, and so like, I mean, it's just like, it went from like, hadn't seen a polar bear, everything was awful. And then all of a sudden, like, here's our chance.
Yeah.
And so we kind of let the boat float and kind of get to where the boat's out of sight, and then we start up the engine, and we motor the boat over to the shore and beach the boat, kind of where the bear can't see us. Like there's a huge rock wall, like right when you get to the shore, and the bear can't see us or hear us because the ocean's so loud crashing up against the shore. And so we beach the boat, and it happens so quick. Like we know he's pretty close to the shoreline, and so as soon as we beach the boat, like we did it quietly. And we're like, okay, we're in the zone already. Like usually it's like you get to watch the animal a minute before a bow like actual stalk starts, before an archery stalk starts. But it was like one of those things. As soon as we stepped off the boat, it was like, okay, game time. So I knocked an arrow. We start like walking up this big drainage. There's a huge like gulch, and we just started walking up it. And it's covered with shale, so it was really really noisy, real slow going. We were just trying to be careful, and we're walking up here, and then we'd done this for probably 20 minutes. We're walking up this like super slow up this drainage because we don't want to come up on the bear and like scare him or him know we're there before we do. And my guide peeks his head up over and he goes, there's the bear. And I just like I raise up, bring my binos up, and the bear's sitting there at 110 yards is how far he was when we first saw him. He's sitting there bedded down on the ground, and I still have still shots from it. He's bedded down on the ground gnawing on a caribou leg of a caribou that he killed.
Gosh.
And he's just got it like over his leg, and he's just sitting there gnawing on it. And it was just like, it was the most surreal thing. Like, I dreamed about seeing a polar bear, just seeing one my whole life. And then all of a sudden, it just happens. And it's just like, there he is. And he's sitting there chewing on a caribou leg, and he doesn't know we're there. And we're just getting to watch this giant beast in his natural habitat. And I was just enjoying, like, the moment. At that point, it's completely flat all the way to the polar bear. Nothing we can really do. The wind wasn't good. And so we're kind of pinned down, like, just watching him at that moment. And so we do this. We watch him for probably 30 minutes. He gets up. He meanders around. And then finally, I'm like, okay, I got to try something. We're going on dark, and we got to go back to the cabin soon. So we're running out of daylight at this point. And there's also the storm moving in. The storm had come quicker than expected, and we were about to get hammered with some rain and some high seas. And so all this is on my mind. I've got all these factors to consider, and also like this giant bear sitting here. Like if in a perfect world, I would have sat on that bear all day, never let him know that I was there, and then he would have eventually meandered over to a spot where I could get cover and I could sneak up on him and shoot him without him ever knowing I was there. And I would have just played the long game. Like, he's not going anywhere. But I had to get creative. I had to make a move. We were running out of time. And so I told my dad, I was like, I'm going to do what I always do. And so I set my bow down beside me, and I lean back, and I just start doing this scooting thing that I always do. Like, it's just kind of a butt scoot where you're just bringing your heels to your butt and just kind of scooting along the ground. And I'm facing forward that way in case I have to get up on my knees and draw real quick. But I've got an arrow knocked, and I'm like, I'm just going to go straight to the bear. I'm going to be inside the whole time, and I'm just going to, every time he looks away or every time he puts his head down, every once in a while he'll actually start sleeping. And I was like, every time he puts his head down, I'm going to start crawling, and I'm just going to see how close I can get. So I do this, and I get to about 85 yards. And I'm moving, I'm watching his head. I'm pulling up my binos to make sure I can't even see his eyeballs, because if I can see his eyeballs, he can see me. And at one point, all of a sudden, I'm crawling, and I'd seen his head was down, and then I'm crawling, and he just jerks his head up and looks at me. And I'm at 85 yards from a 1,000-pound plus polar bear, giant bear, and he's just looking me right in the eyes. And I was like, man.
Bro, I'd be tripping.
Like, it was actually the craziest thing, most surreal thing ever. And I'm just sitting there. I didn't make a move. I'm just not moving a muscle. And I just sat there. This goes on for probably a minute straight. It felt
Bro, I feel like your dad was like, if this polar bear starts charging, we're going with guns.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. So the guides were back there. The guides were back there with guns, watching the whole thing happen. So if he would have charged me, they would have taken care of it. But he watches me for probably 60 seconds and then gets up, and I can hear him hissing. My brown bear that I shot did the same thing. When they sense danger or feel threat, and they start doing this like sound, and it's
gonna sound good in the audio.
It's really yeah.
I've only heard bears growl, or roar.
Well, you haven't been this close to a polar bear.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
So he starts kind of hissing and meandering off, and he knows something's up, and then he goes up on, there's kind of a rise up next to me, but it's 100 yards away, and he's starting to make his way a little bit farther away from me, but he goes up on this rise, and he's going to get the angle to eventually get my wind. And I see what he's doing, I know what he's doing, but as he's moving, he knows I'm there, but he doesn't know what I am. And he's a polar bear. They're apex predators. They're not really, they're cautious, but they're not scared, if that makes sense. And so as he's moving to kind of loop and get my wind, I'm moving with the wind in order to cut him off, and I'm going to try to intercept him. And hopefully without him noticing, I'm going to gain ground on him as he's moving around. And so that was the plan. I'm inching closer to him as he's moving to get my wind. And then all of a sudden I had been moving every time he moved his head away, same kind of deal. And then all of a sudden I moved once, and he whipped his head around. And, it's weird with animals. You can get away with whatever you want to, and then all of a sudden it just seems like they decide they want to be really scared again, and then they catch you doing something, and they just think of a reason to bolt. So that's what happened. He caught me moving again, and that was all she wrote. Bear absolutely bolts and starts running away, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
How fast are those things?
They're fast. For their size, they're fast. I mean, they're they'd be on you pretty quick.
Mm.
So he takes off running, goes up over this hill, and I can't see him anymore, but I take off running after him. I'm like, dude, this is stupid. Every time I've done this, once an animal runs, it's pretty much over, but you never know what might happen. They might stop to look back, and that's always the hope when you do this. So I just took off running after him. I get up to the top of the rise. We're making a bunch of noise because the guide and my dad followed me, and we're in this boulder field, and, it's just noisy. There's these giant boulders. I mean, as tall as the ceiling boulder field, and it's treacherous, a good place to break your leg, but just this field of huge boulders. And I'm making my way through there, trying to be as quiet as can be. I also can't see the bear because as big as this bear is, this place that we're in is just like bizarre. Like he found the one place in the world that could actually hide an animal that big. And then all of a sudden I come up over this, like, I go down in a crack between two rocks, and then I come up on another rock, and I just, all of a sudden I see this ginormous head, like giant polar bear head.
How far were you from it?
Probably 50 yards, but for that big of an animal, like, that seemed close.
Yeah.
Right.
At like 50 yards, he's just sitting there watching me. Like, I come up over, and it's like we meet eye to eye. And I was like, holy crap. So I just, like, kind of dropped to the floor, and I'm just sitting there watching him, seeing what he does. And so he kind of, like, starts trotting again, and it's like this cat and mouse game we're playing now. He knows he's being pursued. He's not happy about it. And so he's going to come, mark his territory. And so he actually starts coming towards me again, coming to look for me. And so I dip down below a boulder. My dad's, like, telling me he's coming. And I'm like, oh, awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
And so, but they're like, we're watching you from back here. Yeah, man. And so I just, like, knock an arrow, get ready. And I see this opening, and I'm like, okay, I range this opening. I know how far it is. He comes out from behind it. And all of a sudden, he's just standing in the exact spot that I'd ranged with my rangefinder a couple seconds earlier. Everything was textbook. He's standing broadside. I draw my bow back, and he's just he's standing there looking at me. And I draw back my bow, and everything felt right. It was just like everything was going smooth. I hadn't had time to get worked up, and I released the arrow. And everything had felt good up to that point, and then Jack knows what I'm talking about. Just the release just did not feel good. Like the shot.
Were you shaky?
Not yet. The shot execution just didn't feel right. And it turns out I'd forgotten to level my bubble. And in this boulder field, you couldn't really tell it was level. And my shot, he was barely quarter-2, and I wanted to hit him like kind of right behind his front shoulder. Even though he's quarter-2, you can't punch through a shoulder on a polar bear. They're huge. And I accidentally hit him in front of the shoulder. So it was kind of a marginal shot. I don't think it clipped really any vitals. But immediately I knew what I did. I knew I didn't make a good shot. Bear lets out this huge roar and just starts biting at the wound. Super pissed off. Starts biting at the wound. And then
This is crazy.
And then all of a sudden just kind of looks back up and is like, "Is that all you
Looking
got, man?"
for you.
And so I knock another.
Did he pull the arrow out of him or what?
No, it passed right through.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so he looks back at me like what just happened? And I'm so taken aback by the moment. I'm just like, holy crap. And my dad has to remind me, he's like, I hear him from 10 yards away. He's like, knock another arrow. And so I grab another arrow, knock another arrow, and draw back again. And here's where the shaky part comes in. So on the first shot I mentioned I didn't have time to get nervous. Still botched the shot. This time I draw back, and I've never been actually shaky on a shot before. I've botched shots and made bad shots, but it's never been because I'm actually shaky. And I'll go ahead and demonstrate, and this is not an exaggeration, how bad I was shaking. I get back to full draw, and this is what it looked like. Legitimately, it was that bad. I kid you not. It was the worst shakes I've ever had in my life. It was just the intensity of the moment, the fact that everything was happening right then, the fact it was the last animal for my super slam. This is for all the marbles, and all that pressure just hit me right at that moment, and I'm shaking worse than I have in my entire life, and somehow I have to make a 50-yard shot and make a better one than I just made when I wasn't even that nervous. And so I try to put it on him. I'm holding it. I've already got an arrow in the animal, so the important thing is to get another arrow in the animal no matter where it goes. And I shoot again, and it was one of those things that happened so quick. I never don't know where my shot goes, and this one I legitimately don't know where it went, but the bear roars again, so I know that I hit him, and then takes off running. And in the heat of the moment,
It gets crazy.
Yeah. So we mentioned before, rewind, the guide has the backup gun. The guide is the only one with a backup gun. My dad doesn't have a gun. The other assistant guide doesn't have a gun. He's just there. And I don't have a gun. And so I did what any logical human would do, and I take off running after a wounded polar bear without a gun.
Bro.
And
In rubber boots.
in rubber boots, I was in 18-inch lacrosse.
Those blisters
rubber boots.
must have been
Over
crazy.
those
You have no idea.
boulders.
Over those boulders.
Parkour.
And I just took off running. I just yeah, parkour. I just took off running. Like I didn't. It was one of those things. It was so stupid. But like when I get zoned in and like I'm determined to like harvest an animal, like I've chased animals so far before after a marginal shot. Like it doesn't. I'm not any super athlete or crazy hiker or anything. But I turn into one when an animal is like when I need to get it done. Like it's like this adrenaline rush comes over you, and you need to make it happen.
And also, your guide just saw you shoot a polar bear, so this is your only shot at a bear.
Yeah, I mean, I drawn blood. You don't mess around on these hunts. Like I drawn blood. That's my animal, and so
Yeah, you either kill this one or you're not getting a polar bear.
yeah. And it's not a cheap hunt. It's like one of those things. It's like let's make it happen. So I take off running after the polar bear. And it starts out like I don't have a prayer at this thing. Like I lose him for like 10 minutes, and I'm just running. I'm running in the direction I knew he went. And then finally, like I'm looking back at my dad as my dad's throwing his arms up in the air, yelling at me not to do what I'm doing. And I'm like, I gotta go. Like I just went. And but I could tell they told me like what the general direction, because my dad, like, he did not want me to do what I did. What I did was stupid. Like, totally ill-advised. I would never, like, nobody should do this. But my dad, like, knew that I was going to do it anyway, so he pointed to where he could see the bear. He had a better vantage point than I did, and I'm way out in front of them, and, like, there's no way they're going to be able to keep up with me and this bear, especially because my guide is a 6-year-old chain smoker. And so I forgot to mention that. And he's the only one with the gun. He won't let my dad have the gun. Like, my dad, come to find out, had asked him if he could have the gun to, like, chase down his son who's chasing the polar bear. And then he was like, nope, sorry, man. I'm holding on to this thing.
Yeah. Sorry. No.
Sorry, buddy. So I'm running after this bear. And literally, I'm at first, like, I didn't have a prayer at it. Like, it wasn't going to happen. And then I see it, like, down in this valley, and it's, like, way the heck off. Like, it's, like, so far out ahead. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't even know why I'm trying this. It's a polar bear. I don't even know or think that I've, like, clipped vital organs at this point, but it's one of those things. I'm just going to make it a war of attrition, and whoever lasts longer, like, I'm going to either die chasing this thing or he's going to die because I'm going to catch up with him. And so it just became, like, a war of wits. And basically what I did was every time the bear would go out of sight, I would sprint up to the next point because he knew he was being pursued. Like, animals are smart. Every time the bear would go out of sight, I would sprint up to the next point where I could see the bear. And then every time he would look back at me, I would just hit the floor. I didn't want to scare him any more than he already was. So it was like this, like, I was kind of yo-yoing. I was just like, trying to, like, close that distance as much as I could. And the distance, like I said, the whole time he, like, knew I was pursuing him, but I was trying not to make him any more scared than he needed to be. And that allowance distance that he was giving me was getting closer and closer. But not in short order. This lasted for 3 hours. I chased him 5 miles in rubber boots. And the distance that he would let me get went from 300 yards to 250 yards to 200 to 100 yards, and then to 60 where I shot him again, to 40 where I shot him again, to 20 where I shot him again. And, I'm never like, those last couple of shots were in very, short time frame. I was trying to get arrows in the animal to put him down, to be ethical. I'm not an advocate for making bad shots. I'm not an advocate for, making marginal shots. But once the first arrow was in that animal, I was going to do what it took to take that animal down as quick as I could. And I chased the bear for 5 miles and put more arrows in him and eventually killed him.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Stupidest thing I've ever done. Twice he looked back at me like I thought he was going to charge. He, like, actually started kind of coming at me, and I just backed off. I, like, actually low-key, like, started running a little bit. But we don't have to talk about that. But, yeah, I never had a backup gun the entire time. Stupidest thing I ever done, and also, like, the best thing I ever did, because I'm able to sit here and say that I'm the youngest super slammer ever because of it.
How long did it take, like, your dad and the guide to get to you?
After I stopped it and was there with the bear, it took them, like, another 20 minutes to catch up with me.
Golly. And the bear, like, swam out, right?
Do what?
Didn't its bear swim out?
Yeah, he swam out in the water and died in the water.
Dang.
Like I had chased.
So did he just
I
float?
had chased him to the shore of the ocean.
That's nuts.
Did he just float or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're. I mean, I don't even know how my arrow penetrated. Like, legitimately, these things don't have fat; they have blubber. When we skin the thing, there's like that much blubber, like fat.
Wow.
Under the they're the toughest built animals. It's crazy. The bear was almost 10 foot, 9.5 foot, and we estimated his live weight somewhere around 1,200 pounds. That's what we guessed.
Golly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So then, the whole time this is happening, storms rolling in.
Storms rolling
So
in.
it got pretty dicey coming home, right?
Yeah, that was. I mean, it was. This is why this has to be one of my favorite hunts because of how dramatic. Like, it couldn't have been any more dramatic. Like, I gotta write a story about it one of these days. Like, get it on paper before I forget all this stuff. But, yeah. So we're taking pictures. It's like the happiest a person could be. I'm so excited. We just got this done. Like, such a surreal moment. It's my super slam. I'm
It's
emotional.
a special moment between you and your dad too, I'm sure.
Oh, we're
Like,
crying. Like, he catches up to me. It's one of those things where it's like, like he screamed in my face. I mean, he was pissed at me, and he was like, it's like one of those things. He's like, never do that again. And then he like starts crying. And we just like hugged.
You were taking off, and he didn't know if you're gonna die or not.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure. I can't even imagine what was going through his head. But yeah. So we just embraced, and like we're both crying. Like, such a special moment. It's something he's been there every step of the way. He's climbed every mountain I've climbed. He's taken every step I've taken. He just didn't get to pull the trigger. So, shout out to my dad for being a stud.
That's awesome.
And that was just like a special moment I will never forget.
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, we're taking pictures. We celebrate as much as we can. Get, like, some really, really cool pictures that, I'll be able to show one of these days. And then we skin the bear out, The Inuits just make like quick work of this thing. I mean, they're used to cleaning whales, and so they get out these, usually the big thing in the hunting industry now are these like Havalon knives that are they have surgical blades on them, like surgical grade, blades
and
that
they
are
are sharp.
that are replaceable that will cut your finger off.
Yeah.
And they're unreal. So they're literally like the same sharpness of like knives you use for surgery. That's not what the Inuits use. They use very sharp knives of their own. But, I mean, we're talking like tools, like more than knives. Like they got this giant fillet knife that's like this wide, and they're just, going, like, the cuts that they were making, I could have swore they were going to cut the hide. But they're just, like, so good at what they do. They've done it so much. They live off of the land. And they made such quick work of this polar bear. It was unbelievable. And they had to because the storm I mentioned earlier, in the time that it took me to get up to the polar bear, had closed in on us and was there. And we needed to leave so much earlier than we did. And here's the storm, and like we're finishing up cleaning the polar bear. The seas are just getting like the ocean is so rough. We're talking like 6 to 10 feet high seas, and it's just like giant swells. And so they're like, well, we can't stay out here. We're gonna freeze. It's pouring down rain on us, and we can't stay in the boat tonight. And so we're going to have to make it back to Coral Harbor. Coral Harbor is it's about 3.5 hours from where we were, where I killed the bear. And so
Wow.
He's like, I've done this once before in worse seas, but only once. And he said, that time I wrote a note to my wife, stuck it in a bottle, and thought we were going to die. And so I was like, sweet. Let's make it happen.
I'm sure you were just like, sweet.
Yeah, no, I was actually like, it was the scariest I've ever been in my life. Like, I looked at my dad, I was like, are we good? He's like, yeah, we're good. Like, I mean, say a prayer.
Yeah, what else what is he gonna say? Like, yeah, we're about to die.
Yeah, no, it was so, we take off. We got this, it was just so crazy. Like, I felt like I was in a Mission Impossible movie. Like, we got this polar bear in the back. I'm sitting there looking at my polar bear, so I'm like elated. But, we're in this tiny fishing skiff on 10 feet high seas, and I kid you not, for over 3 hours, and let me preface this by saying, like, if you fall off the boat, it's not a matter of, like, you're going to drown. Like, you're not going to, like, because we had life jackets on, but you're going to freeze before a life jacket can like ever save you in that water. Like you're gonna hit that water and you're gonna freeze because of hypothermia. If we got the clothes wet that we were wearing, it was over. Like you do. If you fall in the water, it was over.
What about the rain?
What do you mean?
Like, what didn't that freeze? Like on your clothes?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm wearing a down jacket.
Okay.
Under my water resistant jacket, but not like. And I had rain gear on, but literally like everything's getting through here, like type of places. Like it's getting up my sleeves. Everything I have is like frozen to me, exactly like you said, like freezing rain.
Yeah.
And we're taking these, like, we're on the boat, and he's like, I mean, I kid you not, like, I can honestly say the only reason I'm alive today and survived this night in pitch black darkness. I mean, it was the scariest thing. Like, I can't even describe to you how scared I was. Like, I've been on flights in the worst weather you could imagine, you know, taking 60-foot drops in a bush plane, like, you know, crazy situations. I've almost fallen off a mountain, but this was the scariest I've ever been in my life. And the only reason I'm still alive today is because our not only was the Lord watching over us, but he was guiding the hands of my guide, who I do not know how he got us out of the situation, but was just driving that boat the exact way, or conning the boat. You know what I'm saying? He was conning that.
Drive a boat.
He was
You
conning
con
that
it.
boat the most skillful way you could. But even still, I mean, we'd go up over a wave, and we'd absolutely smack down, and water would come up over it, like every single time.
When he says like 10-foot waves, like he's talking about a wave goes up 10 feet and then like down 10 feet.
Yeah. So we would go up the 10-foot wave,
Wow.
and then like this height of the ceiling, and then we would go straight down, and
Yeah.
nose of the boat would dip in the water, and water would fly all over us. I mean, I kid you not, I was chilled to the bone. I was soaking wet with freezing cold ocean water by the time we got back. I mean, water coming over the front of the boat was a normal occurrence. Like, it happened every single time. Like, if we would have hit those waves wrong and would have had a less skilled, boat driver, we literally wouldn't be here today. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
that's
like
crazy.
I was freezing cold, soaking wet for 3 hours. I thought I was, possibly going to die. And then we got back to the shore, and,
The party was on.
party was on.
Was it done raining when you got to the shore?
No. It whizzed rain for 4 days straight after that.
Wow. So it was kind of.
So
It wasn't one of those things you could have waited out on the island. It was like do or die.
our window to get back to Coral Harbor was that. Our window to kill the polar bear was when I did. Like, that was it. Like, it was,
Dang.
I killed the polar bear, got out, and we got back to camp, and it was like, I mean, legit, my dad was like, dude, did we even, like, really, like, do the super slam if nobody's here to witness that we did it? He's like, I better text your mom real quick. So on the sat phone, he was like, hey, we killed the polar bear. We're kind of in a precarious situation right now. I'll text you when we get out of it. But, I mean, getting back to shore, I was just like, it's the scariest I've ever been in my life. It was crazy.
That's just wild, dude.
The craziest day I could even.
It's a wild life, huh?
It's a wild life.
The story gets better every time I hear it. but
Yeah, that's
It's
sick.
nuts, dude. So awesome.
Well, that's the first time it's been shared publicly, so.
Exclusive
Wow.
here on Wild
On
Wild.
here.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
What an
crazy,
honor.
dude.
For the first time.
Man, we're gonna have to go hunting with you sometime. I'm sure Jack already has, but well,
It's a
you
good time.
definitely have. But
Me and Jack have been stomping around the woods since we were young.
That's right.
With our dads,
Yeah.
Brent and Jim taking us out in the woods, just kicking around, man. We were doing
Yeah.
it,
Some of the best memories, really.
dude. Yeah, a lot of fun.
I killed my first deer on your place.
Yep. And the day that you did that,
That was the day you killed your big buck, right?
yeah.
Or then you killed it like the night
The
before,
night
right?
before, we
Yeah.
still had it propped up, and we could
Yeah.
take that picture.
Yeah, that we need to find that picture. Because
I
didn't
know.
we took a picture with like me
Both.
and Piper shot one too, your sister.
Did she?
She shot a doe that morning, I think, with her crossbow.
Oh, really?
We had like a triple threat
Triple
picture.
threat.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We should see if we can find that.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, so a little bit off of the hunting. I mean, you go to Oklahoma State now.
Yep.
You're in a frat,
Yep.
big frat daddy.
Big frat guy.
Frat Lord, Lincoln Tapp.
Yeah, Jack actually got me to go to Oklahoma State. Cool story. I was at Oklahoma Christian first, and which is a small Church of Christ school in Edmond, which is pretty close to where I grew up. I grew up in a small town called Luther, but I went to Oklahoma Christian my first year. Thought I wanted the smaller school, which there's nothing wrong with OC. I love OC. I love the people I met there. Good people. Still know a lot of people there, but just kind of felt like I wanted to meet a lot more people. And so I went to one basketball game with Jack.
It was a Tech game.
Yep.
We went to overtime.
Yep.
Yeah.
Over winter break.
Yeah.
And I came up here, and this is my winter break at OC. I come up here, I go to that game, and we walked out, and I told Jack, I'm like, I'll be here next year. And
Yeah.
so
Hey.
I
Went on a little tour afterwards.
I
Showed
did.
him the ropes.
Yeah. So I stuck out my next semester, my spring semester at OC, and then I transferred to OSU. Rushed a year late, rushed beta, and now I'm just here, do my thing. I'm a junior,
That's cool.
and
So now you're kind of living like a normal lifestyle.
Yeah, how has that been? I mean, you're so confined to literally all you know is hunting. And then you switch completely to studying all the time and doing school, you know?
I mean that's literally what it felt like. I had put everything I had in that goal. I grinded on it for years and years, like 10 years of my life, 10 years of my 20-year life. I was put into that hunting like half my
You've
life.
been chasing that for longer than you've been alive, pretty much.
Right. So I mean that's all I knew, and then all of a sudden I'm just like, but it was one of those things. It's like in due time, and it really did feel right. Like it was like, all right, we're closing that chapter, and like I wouldn't trade anything I learned on the Super Slam, anything I went through, none of the time commitment. Like it made me who I am today, no doubt. But like when it was over, it was like it was time. It was time to go to college. It was time to live that, live the life that I didn't really get to in high school, and the fact that I didn't get to is something I'm honored to say, because it allowed me to do the greatest thing that I'll ever get to do. But, at the same time, it was time to, get to live the college kid life, and I love it. Like, I've met guys like you guys, and it's awesome, man. I love the people here. I love the scene, and,
I think you should look into making, like, one big movie of
Like a
all your
documentary?
things and putting them together.
What if that's already happening?
Oh.
No way. Dude, that would be sick. Of like
That would be sick.
little Lincoln to big Lincoln.
You have like different actors like playing who you are, like a little kid, and then like older Lincoln.
Not as much like a movie type of deal with like actors, but like the culmination of the Super Slam is going to be put together into a documentary.
That's sick.
And it's going to be, because literally half of what I did is still not aired. Like it's never been put into anything.
Some of your craziest hunts haven't even been seen by anybody.
100%. And it wasn't the same production quality like in the field. It wasn't shot as well as like what we were putting together specifically for TV, because there's certain shots you get for TV. But it'll be very like raw documentary style, and it'll just be like the nitty gritty of like what we did,
Do you have
Yeah.
video of like the polar bear stuff?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not a ton, because my dad also had the camera.
Yeah, the cameraman
So
was
that-
left behind.
The culmination of the Super Slam was between me and that bear, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of a special thing. I don't know. It was just kind of fitting. Like even though we had the whole Super Slam on camera, and that's something that you might think I would be sad about, it was just like that's a snapshot in my mind that only I have.
Right.
Kind of crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, we have so much on film that we never did anything with, and it's gonna be. I want to put it together the right way. I want to entrust it to some producers that can knock it out of the park, and we're gonna do it. It's gonna be cool.
That's sick.
It's gonna be so awesome.
Yep. Well, I think that's all good. Are y'all good?
Yeah.
I
Wrap
feel
her
like
up.
we could have like 5 more podcasts. Just
Dude,
awesome
that was
stories.
freaking
Yeah.
sick.
If we
Yeah,
went on to another hunting story, this would go another
Oh
hour.
my gosh.
Yeah.
We need to talk college life too at some point. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
I'm passionate about that too, and we could talk about current events too. And I wouldn't have to talk the whole time. I feel
We'll
like.
we'll
no,
see
that's
how
what that's what we brought
Stories-
you on here
yeah, the
for.
stories
Come
are
on.
great.
Once I get going about my hunting stuff, I just kind of.
we'll see how many views we get on this one, and then
Yeah, we'll see what the fans like, dude.
Yeah.
All our subs. Dude, thank
Need you
y'all
guys
for
to
Yeah,
subscribing.
yeah, go subscribe.
Like, subscribe, comment.
Also, follow our Instagram. We just made a new TikTok too.
Yeah, Mason's
My-
running the Instagram.
Yeah, follow us.
good job.
Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit,
Yeah,
Well, I
but
guess-
keep up with what we got going.
I got one last question for you though.
What's up?
You've completed the Super Slam. What's next? hunt for fun? Just kind of, is there any new goals you want, or?
Hunting for fun is definitely what I've been doing, and I love that. Like keeping it as a passion and having it as a passion for these last, 5 years has been the best decision I ever made because it made me, fall back in love with it. But I think Capra and Ovis World Slams is what I'm gunning for.
What's that?
So the Capra World Slam it's 12 world goats, so ibex, mountain goats, what's crazy about that is they live in literally the most treacherous mountains in the world. And then 12 of the world's wild sheep, which is the Ovis. So it'd be 24 total of the hardest animals in the world to hunt with a bow. It's harder than the Super Slam. It's still a step up from what we've already done. So that's going to be a longer goal. That's going to be a lifelong thing, but that's what I'm gunning for now. And I've got plans that, in this next year where I'm even, working towards it. But yeah, and then Africa too. I want to run it up with some friends of mine in Africa, do some African stuff, but not a specific goal, just doing it for fun. But big things on the horizon still, and it really just depends on how, if I can make enough money to do it all, I'll do it. So
Yeah.
Heck yeah, dude.
that's what I college for.
Yeah, that's right. Getting that degree, baby.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much for joining us. That was just awesome hearing all those stories, and even hearing those before and hearing them again, they just get better and better. So, appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right.
Sick.
Thanks for tuning in.
All right.
Peace.
See you guys.
See ya.
Let me tell you this, the older you do get, the more rules are gonna try to get you to follow. You just gotta keep living, man. LIVIN.